Hello, this is Sandy with a little bit of glitter, and today I have a really fun interactive card. I've used Lawn Fawn's new stamp collection called Whoosh Kites and their interactive die called Swich Pop and Pull Tab. This card just tickles me. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you'd like to be notified of future videos. You can follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdill or on my blog, A Little Bit of Glitter. Let's get started. I've stamped all my images on Express It blending card. That's what I prefer to use for my Copic blending. I've used it for a number of years and it works really well for me. For the little mice, I'm going to start out with E51, E53, E55. On their little bellies, I will do a little bit of shading with C0 just to tone down that white. And then in their little ears, I use R20 and R22. For the blues on the kites, I'm going to use B02, B04, and B26. For the turquoise colors on the kites, I am using BG11, BG13, and BG15. For the yellows, I am using Y02, Y06, and Y08. The oranges are Y19, YR04, and YR07. My reds are R05, R24, and R46. And the greens are YG05 and G14. Now to start making my card, I've cut a piece of blue spiffy speckles with the large stitched rectangle. I'm going to use the cloudy stencil along with chipped sapphire distress oxide ink and just lay in some little clouds. I'm not doing those really dark. I just want them very light, so I'm going to just kind of get most of my ink blended off to the side there on a piece of scrap cardstock and just go in and lay in my clouds very gently on the spiffy speckles pattern paper. I don't need to go all the way down on that paper because the grassy area is going to cover up probably maybe the bottom quarter of that piece of paper. In order to keep all my layers nice and uniform, I will cut another piece of spiffy speckles. This one's the green one, using the large stitched rectangle. This time I'm using the simple hillside border, and I'm placing that about 1.25 inches up from the bottom. I'll run that through my die cut, and then I'm going to turn that piece of paper over, just because I don't like to waste my paper, and I will cut another little hillside using the stitched hillside border. This time I'm using the one that's not, it doesn't have a lot of curves and waves to it. This one actually matches the little picket fence border, which I'll put to the back of that little hillside border. When you cut that front piece, you want to make sure you have enough depth in that piece, especially along that right-hand side, to give yourself enough room to cut that tab for your little swish and pop mechanism. The first one I did, I kind of skimped on my hillside and I just did not have enough room to get that little tab cut out. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide ink and just touch up the edges of that green spiffy speckled paper. I like to do that on most of my layers. It just adds a little bit of interest to that paper and it gives it a little bit of dimension. I pretty much do that on all of my layers, on all of my cards. It just adds just a little bit of something extra. I'm cutting the little picket fence border out of the white spiffier speckles paper. I kind of hated using the really pretty spiffier speckles, but I like the little grayish color of that paper. That way I didn't feel like I needed to do any ink blending on it. So I'll go ahead and get that cut out, and then I'm going to glue the green hillside border on top of that. Now that I have those two pieces glued together and trimmed up, I'll go ahead and adhere that to the background of my card. Now it's time to line up that the little guide to get those little holes punched in. So I'm being careful to make sure that that little arm that extends down from where those little holes are is up against the right hand side of my card, and the bottom is at the bottom of my card. So I'm going to get that lined up, put a little bit of temporary tape there, and run it through my die cut. Since I have so many layers of paper there, I do need to use my scissors to kind of help those little holes to come out of that paper. The swish and pop part of the mechanism is cut from acetate. The pull tab is cut from cardstock. I will adhere the pull tab part to the swish and pop with a small brad at the left hand part of the swish and pop. It's so hard to say. And then I will use another small brad to adhere the swish and pop to the card at that hole on the right hand side of the mechanism. And as you can see, it just moves back and forth perfectly. I have my little mouse and my kite just temporarily adhered to the cart, just kind of figuring out where I want that mechanism placed so I know where I want that kite to fly back and forth in the sky. Once I've determined that, then I'll go ahead and I'll kind of place my little hillside on top of that mechanism and just mark where I want that little pull tab to lie so I can cut out that little notch piece. I'll tape that little notch piece in place, lining it up in between my two little tick marks, and run it through my die cut machine. Now that I've got that notch cut out, and before I go any further, I want to make sure that I get my sentiment stamped on that little piece. It would be way too hard to get that stamped on after I get the card put together. So I'm going to go ahead and load that into my MISTI and line up the sentiment from that stamp collection and get that stamped on the bottom of my little hill piece. As you can see, my pull tab is a little bit too long, so I need to get that trimmed off. And then there's a little piece that I can attach to the end that folds over and kind of gives the recipient of the card a clue as to what to do with that little pull tab. So I'll get that trimmed off, and then I will glue that little arrow piece on the end of that pull tab just by folding it over and adhering it on. Okay, now I need to determine how far I want my kite to fly back and forth across my card, and exactly how high I want my kite on my little acetate strip. So I figured out I don't want it to go any further left than where I have it now, so I've placed a little foam dot so it stops it right in that spot. And I also have a little foam dot on the right hand side where I want it to stop. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the rest of that acetate tape because I know I want the kite in that particular spot. I don't want it any higher up on the acetate because then it's going to fly off the top of the card, and I don't necessarily want it to do that either. I think that's exactly where I want it, so I'm going to start building up my card so that that pull tab has some space to move. So I've got some thin foam tape that I'm going to place on the bottom of the card. I'll go ahead and put that there and trim it off. And then on the top hillside, I'm going to start placing foam tape around that card, making sure that when I place the foam tape, it's not going to impede the mechanism or the kite moving back and forth. So this is a little bit tricky. So I'll go ahead and I'll put the foam tape along the left-hand side, which I know is fine because the mechanism doesn't come anywhere close to that left-hand side. And then I've got to put a little bit of the tape on the right-hand side up at the top to support the tab. But on that left-hand side, I just want to make sure I put enough foam tape so that the kite moves all the way to the left where that foam dot stops it. And then on the right-hand side, I need to still give it enough room so that it can go to the right as far as I want it to go, if that makes any sense at all. And as you can see, my little foam dot on the right is showing above my hill, so now I'm going to have to move that down a little bit lower so that my kite will still move over to the right, but my foam dot won't show. It takes a little bit of playing around to figure out exactly where that dot wants to go. All right, it looks like I've got everything where I want it to be as far as that kite movement. So I'm going to go ahead and take the rest of my foam tape and put it on the top of that hillside. And this is where I changed my mind because the fussiness just got to me. I didn't like the white cardstock. I just felt like it just wasn't doing it for me. So I decided I would take apart that little mechanism and I would cut that piece out of some spiffy speckles so that it would blend in with the grassy hillside better. I did that and I just liked it a whole bunch better. So there it is. I just can't help myself sometimes. Oh my gosh, that is so much better. Okay, so now we can put the hillside onto the background of that card. So I'm going to go ahead and pull off the little tape pieces, the protective pieces off of my hillside. And then on my bottom piece, I'm just going to peel that off kind of halfway and fold it down. That way it gives me a little bit of wiggle room as far as getting that placement just right on the bottom. And I'll get that hillside adhered on. And then we will be ready to start decorating the front of the card. That's always the fun part. I'm going to start with that little mouse all the way to the left, the one that's holding the kite. I'm going to put a little spot of glue on his hand on the back. And then I'm going to place a foam dot over that and then foam dots on the rest of him. I do want him to be popped up a little bit. The cord I'm using is, I'm not even sure what brand it is. It's not it's not like a DMC cross stitch thread, but it is like a specialty needlepoint thread. It's kind of thick and shiny, but again, I'm not sure what brand it is. So I'll get that adhered to him, and then I'll place that kite all the way over in the left-hand position to determine how long I need that little piece of thread, and then clip it right there and adhere that to the kite. I do use a really strong double-sided adhesive tape to adhere the kite to the acetate strip. I just didn't want to trust using glue to make sure that stayed on. Now I'll just glue a little bit of cording to the back of that other kite and then attach it to the other little mouse, and then continue on decorating or setting the scene of my little card. Okay, that just about does it for this card. I knew when I saw this stamp set that I was going to have to make this card. I just loved the whole concept of the little mice flying kites. Of course, I love all of Lawn Fawn's little mice. Anyway, go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. You can subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. You can also follow me on Instagram at Sandy Cogdill or on my blog, A Little Bit of Glitter. Thanks for stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.